Hi guys and girls, I'm Obsidian Ant and welcome back to Elite Dangerous. A point raised with increasing frequency is the idea that Elite Dangerous has a content problem. Looking at the community's comments on forums, Reddit and indeed on YouTube, it's easy to see that belief in this perceived problem is gaining increasing traction. Let me be clear here right at the start though, it's not that everyone is getting fed up with the game, but rather that a growing number of people are, and they often cite that content is an issue. The question then, is this really a genuine problem for the game, or is it, as some would have you believe, the result of a small segment of salty, bored and burnt out players? Now that observation raises a few interesting points in itself, doesn't it? Most notably, the division between players. You can see this wherever you go, and to be honest it happens with every game ever, and indeed with just about every subject in history. But it is something worth taking a look at here in the context of Elite, as it perhaps centres around the crux of the issue that Elite Dangerous has with content, or lack thereof depending on how you look at it. The problem with content in Elite then might perhaps be a matter of who that content is aimed at. This is a subject that Lave Radio host Commander Shanaeri looked at all the way back in 2015 with a great forum post on content and grind. In it, he broadly categorises players into two camps. The content consumer, that's those who love the new ships, enjoy progressing towards new gear and unlocks, and love looking for the next new thing. The second category of player he called the content contributor. Contributors tend to work within the game, using it as a tool for emergent gameplay, community-driven events, and building a relationship with the game's world, whether that be its environments, characters, or lore. Generally speaking, this type of player is not a huge fan of grinding or gear treadmills. And just so that I don't quote Shanaeri out of context here, he was talking about power play during its beta phase when he made the post. But it does highlight that back then, Elite Dangerous was a very different beast. The game appeared to be aimed more at the content contributor rather than the content consumer. At any rate then, yes, content means very different things to different people. In one sense, Elite does have a lot of content. In fact, it has a huge amount of it. Many ships, dozens of modules, hundreds of upgrade combinations, a whole ton of materials to collect, reputations to increase, permits to gain, engineers to unlock, ruins to scan, factions to manipulate, the list goes on and on. Over the past few years, much of this has arrived in the form of new content. For example, in 2015, the engineers were not even a thing that anyone within the community would have ever imagined and come into the game. So yes, Elite does have content, and Frontier does add new content at a reasonably regular rate. Anti-Thargoid weapons and Guardian unlocks are some very recent examples of this. Now this is a very good thing, and Frontier have clearly put plenty of thought into how they want all of this stuff to work in terms of gameplay. The trouble is though, that unfortunately this form of gameplay only serves one of the two player types. Those people who want new modules, ships and reputation ladders love to get new stuff, whilst those who are here for the in-game community and its environments really want to be able to focus on the aspects that contribute towards the very things they enjoy the most. So how does Elite serve these player types? Does it tend to favour one over the other, or does it do a good job of pleasing both? It's a balance that I don't envy any developer, and it's something that isn't easy to achieve. Games like World of Warcraft have made huge business in offering continuous streams of new content to burn through and new items to gain or unlock, whilst games like EVE Online tended to focus on emergent and dynamic gameplay. Of course, that is very black and white, and both games offer a fair bit of both, but the point here is that both games understand its player base and gives it what it wants. And that brings me back to the question on Elite: where does it stand in the scheme of things? Is it giving players what they want, and is this a factor in the increasing discontent towards the game? Well, we've already established that Elite offers plenty of unlocks and such content for players that enjoy that stuff, yet it somehow has a reputation of being one of the most grindy games out there. On the other hand, it offers very little in the way of tools to provide players with emergent or even dynamic gameplay. Sure, players can move from one task to another, they can go from mission to combat for example, and they can certainly spend a whole lot of time manipulating the background simulation, but none of this is really the same thing. On the other hand, the various puzzles and other activities out there, such as the audio decoding, were very good, but they're a niche and they're solved without in-game tools, and therefore surely not aimed at the majority of the player base. I'd also argue that content such as the Thargoid bases, Thargoid encounters and damage stations potentially serve both player types. However, the alien bases don't really fit into the overall game loop, such as missions for example, whilst the damage stations rely very heavily on basic repeating game loops. The subject of repeating game loops then brings me to another area. Whilst it's great to have loads of content to engage with and unlock, and whilst clearly a huge number of people enjoy the process of unlocking all that stuff, there is a threshold, a limit to the gameplay loop. Too much of a particular activity and even the most ardent of players will find it a grind. The Guardian unlocks are unfortunately a fantastic example of a developer taking things too far. As we know, to unlock a Guardian module you need a module blueprint, and to unlock a Guardian weapon you need a weapon blueprint. There's also vessel blueprints, and as yet they don't have a purpose. The way to gain the blueprints though is to complete a puzzle at the new Guardian ruins. This is essentially a time-based run against a clock, at the end of which you get a single blueprint. The problem is that each module or weapon requires multiple blueprints, and in some cases this means that the race against time at the ruins needs to be repeated 20 times or more. Further still, that once completed, the puzzle needs to be reset. This involves a player logging out to the main menu and then logging back into the game again, or alternatively flying away from the area, entering Supercruise and then returning again, so it makes the whole thing feel very artificial. There literally is no other way to do this, there's no other way to get the Guardian unlocks. In short, unlike material collection, you simply cannot collect blueprints through natural day-to-day gameplay. The only way to gain them is through a repetitive grind, and this really is a shame, as recent Guardian locations are amazingly realised and the puzzle itself is very nice. Now to be fair here, Frontier have stated that they are going to reduce the time requirements for these unlocks, but the fact remains that this is very much a game loop that does nothing to hide its repetitive nature. In short, it's too much grind for those who love unlocks, and for those who don't like unlocks, it's not even worth touching. But of course, this video isn't about unlocks, and it's certainly not about grind. I do personally feel, however, that the Guardian unlock highlights where Elite is at the moment. It's not so much a question that Elite Dangerous lacks content, but rather a question of who does that content serve. And to be perfectly honest, that's not even a question I can actually answer here, as the lines are so blurred as to who the content is aimed at. I believe this leaves a lot of players with uncertainty as to what and where the content actually is, and just maybe this is a part of the cause for the growing player dissatisfaction. There is without doubt a huge slant towards content unlocks, and in my opinion there is far too much of that, but equally many people do enjoy that stuff. I also feel there's nowhere near enough tools to interact with the amazing galaxy and in-game community, though it's quite possible that upcoming updates for exploration, mining and squadrons will address this. Don't forget though, this is just my opinion and your mileage will certainly vary. So here then, at the end of the video, let me iterate once more, it's not that everyone has had enough with the game, but you'd be blind not to notice the change in attitude from the community. I do believe that the intention from Frontier has been to address these issues and more in this Beyond series of updates, and with Chapter 2 arriving this quarter, hopefully we're going to see some more of these changes. Frontier have also posted their schedule to discuss future content and how it's going to work, and this includes things like squadrons, mining and exploration. They say they should be starting with these discussions very soon. As always then, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.